How do you go from having an app idea to getting to the point where you can leave your day job and run your own app-based business full time? This is one of my favorite things to talk about because years ago, I left traditional 9 to 5 employment so that I could run a business that I owned as well. And I know the type of impact that can have on your life is just dramatic. And so in this video, I want to help you do the same. But first, let's talk about who this is for. So this is for you if you want to create an app-based business that will allow you to step away from your current job and really just have something that you can control. Control your finances, control your lifestyle, really just have flexibility over your schedule. This is not for you really if you are looking to launch a unicorn company where you want to work up to this $1 billion valuation, right? So if that is more so your style, this probably isn't going to be as helpful. But if you resonate with wanting to create something that you can control and that really just gives you options with your life, then let's get moving. The very first thing you need to do is start with a timeline so that you can kind of visualize where you're going. Right now, you're down here at this idea phase or somewhere around it. And up here, you are trying to reach your exit, right? You're trying to exit your day job at the moment. Now, in order to reach that exit, the first thing you have to do is define the terms of your exit. And to put it in really simple terms, that really just means figuring out how much money you need to make with your app in order to leave your job. Now, you can make this as simple as looking at how much money you make on a monthly basis and saying, okay, well, that's how much money I need to make with my app to leave. But I would encourage you to go a little bit deeper than that. Some people, instead of working toward making an equivalent amount to their current income before they kind of like give themselves permission to leave their jobs, they think, well, I want to make 75% of that or 50% of that. And this is more so what I did as well, because once you can get relatively close to matching your current income, then you can feel confidently knowing that, let's say you are making 50% of your current salary with your app, but currently you are dividing your focus. You're splitting it two ways between your app and your job. Well, if you can make 50% of your current salary in half the amount of time you would ideally be working on that app, then if you left your job with that traction already built up, then you can generally feel confidently that if you put 100% of focus into your app, well, you can work up to that 100% a lot faster. Beyond that, I also really encourage you to go through your expenses with a fine-tooth comb. Pull up your credit card statements, look at all of the payments going out every single month and figure out what you can strip back. This is not fun. It is not glamorous in any way, but it kind of comes down to this. How badly do you want to make this exit? And if you want it badly enough, generally you're going to be able to find some areas in your expenses where you can cut back and make it a little bit easier for you to reach the transition point, so to speak. Once you have defined the terms of your exit, then we want to come back to the timeline and incrementally work your way back out to that exit. So I want to go through some of the main stages that you're going to have to go through so you can have an idea of how long some of these things should be taking. So let's just say right now you are in your idea stage, and I'm going to generalize here a little bit, but the first thing you need to do is work up to the point where you have validation. Okay, and really what this marks on our timeline is the kickoff of your app's development. Okay, so going from idea to validation, there's no way to put an exact hard time frame on that because it really depends on your own experience coming into this. If you are building an app to solve a problem that you currently deal with, you know the processes needed to solve it, and you just need to turn that into an application, that validation period is going to be shorter. If you have a brand new idea, you don't have a ton of knowledge, you've never really talked to people within your market, and you're still kind of figuring things out, that validation stage is going to take longer. But this is something that you need to work through, because you're not going to be able to reach that exit point unless you have a valid app idea that you can actually, generate a revenue on. So what I'm going to do is put a timeline here of 1 to 2 months. And if you already have that validation, then what I would think about doing during that time period is just kind of fleshing out your feature set, scoping out exactly what you're going to build for your first version, and really just preparing for the kickoff of your development. Now, going forward from that, the first thing that you're going to be sort of rolling out is your pilot app. This is the very first version of your app, a stripped back core product. The goal of your pilot app is to get product validation. So you're not putting out a money making product into the market yet. You really just want to make sure that your app idea, once actually put into the hands of users, does solve the problem that it is intended to. That doesn't mean it needs to solve it in all the best ways, the fastest ways, the most convenient, flashy, and perfect ways. It really just needs to solve it. Now, when you're going from that kickoff point to your pilot app launch, really you want to aim for about 3 months. Okay. Um, I wouldn't really, I don't want you to think that it could be like 1 month or 2 months, because, and this also assumes that you're building the app yourself. You're going to be skill building along the way, and you want to make sure you give yourself some breathing room so that you don't burn yourself out along the way as well. So kind of have that number in your mind, that 3 month period. And then from there, you're going to be working out toward your beta app. Now, this is very similar, but with some differences. So with a pilot app, you're looking for product validation. Does the app solve the problem? With the beta app, you are looking for product adoption. So does the app solve the problem in real life applications on an ongoing basis? Is it providing actual value because it's being implemented into users' lives or businesses in some way? Now, from pilot app to beta, and from beta, you're really going to continue rolling out the app, expanding the app from there. You shouldn't really take that long. Really, you could be looking at all of 2 weeks if you have done your work correctly leading up to that point. Because with the pilot app, you have the product. With the beta app, you just have, a few more features that make it a little bit more self-sustainable for users to apply in their real life applications, for example. Now, moving forward from that, I'm just going to put rollout here, and rollout is a little bit vague, but that's because when you move forward from your beta testing, you're just going to continue rolling out the app somewhat indefinitely, right? Your app is always going to be evolving. So we're just calling that rollout. And what we're really talking about is, look, you're at a stage where you have validated the product. Now you have it working for users on an ongoing basis in real life applications, meaning they have adopted it. Now you're just making it better and better, more valuable. You're growing your user base, right? That type of thing. Now, when you're going from beta to rollout, the time span here, I'm going to put 6 weeks as kind of a minimum, but keep in mind that this is really dependent on the feedback you get from your beta users. Right? If you put the app into users' hands for them to use in real life applications on an ongoing basis, and it just does not work for them, it's probably going to take you longer than 6 weeks to get through that stage of making alterations, pivots, that sort of thing. But if everything goes smoothly and you get all the feedback that you're looking for, fantastic, you're good to go. Now you can continue rolling the app out from there. Quick recap, depending on where you are, going from idea to validation could take 1 to 2 months. If you already have that validation, then you're good to go, skip that. Moving forward to building your pilot app, aim for around 3 months. Going from pilot to beta could be as little as a couple of weeks, might take a little bit more time. It really depends on you, the feedback you get. That's a huge factor in it. And really just how much time and effort or investment you're putting into the development to get from pilot to beta. And then from beta to rollout, I'm putting here 6 weeks as a good minimum to expect. But again, it really depends on the feedback and your own capacity. Now, caveat here, this is not to scale. So as much as I would like to say that, from going from rollout to exit is a similar timeline, it's not. So what we're going to kind of do here is create another timeline right here. And this is where things get really fun, because this is where we're going from, we're going to put rollout right here to exit. And it gets fun here because your idea is out there, your app is out there, you have something that you can now grow, right? You've already done all this work, but getting to the point of rolling out the app and growing your user base, growing your revenue, that's kind of like the starting line in a way, right? So to simplify things, we're going to call that rollout to exit period your growth phase. Okay, and now we're going to talk about some of the different constraints that are going to kind of dictate how long that growth phase takes for you. And we're going to talk about some ways that you could potentially speed it up. The caveat here is that there is no hard number that I can put on how long a growth phase is going to take, because it really does depend on a number of factors, which again, we're going to talk about now. There are two very big constraints that you're going to be dealing with and sort of navigating through the growth phase. The first one is just time. It's pretty simple, but how are you going to handle your time? What sort of responsibilities do you have in your life? Do you have a family where you have responsibilities for taking care of your family? And I'm talking about outside of your job. So get real with this, because a lot of people they kind of put on their hustle hats in the very beginning and they think, I'm just going to do the work it takes. I'm going to get it out there. Nothing is going to stop me back. And look, I love the enthusiasm, but often I see those people, once they really get into it, they burn themselves out. It's not sustainable. It just doesn't work with everything else that they have going on. So you really got to get realistic with this. Now, if you have a spouse or a partner, can you discuss your business goals with them and work out some sort of an agreement where they're okay with you spending a certain amount of time every day on the growth of your business? Getting on the same page with them is critical. It's very hard to make a transition like this work if you don't do that. So if you do have a spouse, a partner, a family where you have certain responsibilities, that's the first thing that I would do. Another thing that some entrepreneurs do is they find a co-founder or a partner where they can split responsibilities. Now, this has its pros and its cons. I mean, maybe you already have a partner, and if that's the case, great. Lean on that, leverage that. It's going to be a big asset, but it doesn't always work out. I've seen way too many situations where the partners really just aren't on the same page going into it. Maybe they have different goals, maybe they have different responsibilities in their own lives. And once they really get into the work, one of them just says, this is not for me. I don't want to do this anymore. And that leaves, the other one with everything on their shoulders. It can feel defeating. It can be very hard. So I don't say that to veer you away from finding a partner or a co-founder. Again, it can work and sometimes it can't. It might be for you and it might not be, but it's something to consider because it is a way to navigate the time constraint a little bit differently. Another thing to consider is your actual time spent at work. Can you have a conversation with your boss, maybe the owner of the company, or maybe your team. Maybe you don't have to ask a boss. Maybe you already have your own team and it's just hard for you to step away. But can you have a conversation and figure out responsibilities and how to maybe adjust those? Maybe you can take a little bit of time off each week to focus on this venture. Or maybe you can scale back a little bit. Maybe you can pick up some consulting clients so that you can mold your schedule how you need to during this period, still make some income while being able to focus, or really just be more flexible with the time you focus on your app. Now, is this possible for everyone? No, certainly not. Is it necessary? No, certainly not. But it's just an option to think through and figure out, can you leverage this, or should you, look somewhere else? So constraint number 1 is time. Constraint number 2 is money. Surprise, surprise. There are a couple of ways that I want you to think about this as you move forward. So you can kind of think of having a fallback plan when it comes to the money constraint and a jump forward plan when it comes to the money constraint. Let me explain that. So we talked about coming up with the terms of your exit. In other words, how much money do you need to make with your app to leave your job? The first thing you need to do is turn that into a non-negotiable. That is your rule, because it's easy to kind of let that slide one way or the other once you move forward. But before you are actually in it, I want you to figure out what the number is and turn it into a non-negotiable, because right now you don't have the stress of doing the thing on your shoulders. That means that you can figure this out right now in a more logical and rational way, not in as emotional of a way when that stress comes, and it is going to come. That's just going to be part of it. Okay, so figure out your number, the terms of your exit, and turn that into a non-negotiable. Now, we talked about having a fallback plan with the money constraint and kind of a jump forward plan with the money constraint. So your fallback plan with that non-negotiable can be something like, if it takes me X number of months and I still have not reached the non-negotiable transition number that I've talked about, my exit term. If it takes me X amount of months and I still haven't reached that, then I need to make a hard decision. I need to either reassess my plan and my timeline overall. Maybe I need to go back and reconsider finding a partner. Maybe I need to reconsider picking up some consulting work so that I can scale back my job. Right, so this kind of goes back to the time constraints that we just talked about. So basically, if you haven't hit your exit goal within a certain amount of time that you think is reasonable for you based on your situation, then have a plan of how you're going to reassess so that you don't just kind of continue forward and veer off path and no longer have a plan, which is really kind of like a recipe for disaster with your app and your business as a whole. But on the flip side, I also want you to have that kind of like jump forward alternative in relation to your non-negotiable. So you could say, if I am making 50% of my exit term by this date, then I am going to leave my job, because I feel confidently that if I leave my job and focus 100% of my effort on my app, I can make up the rest of that 50% much quicker. Okay, so you have the time constraint, you have the money constraint. We know those are going to be factors. And the way that you really need to look at transitioning away from your job is that everything you do is going to involve a compromise of some sort. It's not going to be easy. There's not going to be a lot of clarity. Things aren't going to click in place just as you've imagined. This is going to be one big compromise, and it's up to you to figure out where you're going to put your priorities. Which things are more important to you. This is different for everyone. My priorities were different than your priorities are going to be. So you just have to know all these different factors to consider and be equipped and kind of like armed with this knowledge so that when you go into it, you can make better decisions. So with all that in mind, let's talk about different ways you can speed up the process. Going back to our timeline, one of the first things you can do is invest more in these upfront stages. Invest in building your app, finding help to build your app, get it built correctly, get it built faster, right? Find help through the development stages, because if you can speed all of that up, and if you can invest in really just getting clarity for yourself and removing the guesswork of building your skill set, building your app, doing something brand new. If you can invest in that, then it's going to get you to that growth stage a lot faster and a lot more easily. Now, the way that I would invest in this is sequentially. So let's say you invest in getting your pilot app out there. Okay, well, once you get validation for your product and you know that you're on the right path, then you can move forward from there and choose where else to invest, knowing that that investment is going to be made with actual positive data and feedback, with validation. You're not investing blindly, so make smart investments. For example, we see a lot of people struggling to build their apps and just try and figure out everything alone, and they might spend 1 year, 2 years just building the first version of their app, only to realize that on the other side, they have to rebuild because what they know now, they just didn't know then, right? So we help our own clients, our own entrepreneurs go from idea to pilot app through our 12-week coaching program, right? We have the process, we have the structure, so they don't have to do all of the guesswork and all of the figuring out and spend all of that amount of time only to realize, hey, I got to go back and like redo all of this. So choose where to invest if this is an option for you, right? It doesn't have to be, and make those investments smartly. Now, another thing to consider for speeding this up, and now we're going to be looking at specifically the actual growth phase, is to follow the rule of ones. Now, I didn't come up with this. This was taught to me from one of my own mentors. But essentially, when you are launching your first product, your first business venture, it can be easy to get into the mindset of thinking you need to cast as wide of a net as possible. How can I make this app? How can I make my business for as many people as I possibly can? Because casting a wider net means you have more chances to get users, to get customers, to make money, right? But the reality is you need to flip that mindset and get specific instead, because nobody is sitting around thinking to themselves, man, I just wish someone would build an app that was for everyone. Right? Nobody is thinking that. People are sitting around thinking, man, I wish someone would build an app that actually did what I need. Right? So you want to get specific, because specificity actually gives you the option to build that customer base. People don't want generic, they want specific. So going back to the rule of ones, this essentially says that you are going to focus on one segment of your target market with one product. So one core product that solves one problem, enables one outcome. You're going to focus on one marketing or user acquisition channel where you are actually sending out your message to find users. You're going to have one sales funnel, the way you convert those users, and you're going to do all of that for 1 year, right? That's the rule of ones. I'm not saying that your growth phase is going to take 1 year. Again, I don't know how long it's going to take, but if you follow the rule of ones for 1 year, right, then you're going to be able to navigate that growth phase or move through it and reach the terms of your exit a lot more quickly and go above and beyond that a lot more quickly too. So remember that casting a wide net slows you down, focusing helps you go faster. Another thing that's going to speed up your growth period and help you reach that exit faster is by letting consistency compound and making sure that you are playing the long game. Okay, so you can't build your app in development spurts. Let's say one weekend you spend 10 hours a day, 2 days in a row, just focusing on your app. but you don't do that again for another 2 weeks or even another week, it's going to be really hard to make progress, because every time you go back into your app, keeping in mind that you are skill building while you're doing that, then you're going to be relearning things and you're going to be refreshing yourself on what you even did the previous weekend. Because when you're going through that process, that development process, you don't have the skill yet. You haven't mastered it. And so you can't develop the app and the skill set in spurts. You have to work consistently. You're going to make more progress spending 2 hours a day, every day, with your app than you are spending, a solid 48 hours every single weekend. It might sound counterintuitive, but that's just the reality. So you need to plan ahead for that consistency, and realize that consistency compounds. When looking at the entrepreneurial journey, the easiest thing to do is to actually get started, to make the decision to actually start. And that's the easiest thing, but very few people ever do that. So that's not easy. It's just the easiest part of growing your business. Right? Now, the next thing that's a little bit harder than that is actually the execution, building that first rendition of the product, of the business. That's a lot harder. Fewer people ever do that. Okay? The hardest thing of all is being consistent with that execution. Very few people, and very, very few people, are consistent over not just days, not just weeks, not months, but years and years and years of time. But if you can do that, then you can succeed. And so you have to realize that consistency compounds and that you are playing the long game. Because if neither of those things happens, then you're never going to make progress, or you're just going to feel like you're not successful. If you think that this is going to be a quick thing, right? It's not. Now, am I saying that it's going to take years and years and years for you to leave your job? No, not at all. Okay, but I am saying that in order to get to that point, you have to realize in this moment that you're playing the long game with business growth overall. Because when you plan for that, then your immediate successes are going to be a lot more frequent and prevalent. Okay, so you have some ideas on how to speed up that growth period and reach your exit faster, but you're probably still wondering how long this is going to take for you. Now, we've already talked about the fact that we can't put a hard number on that because there are way too many factors and variables at play, and everyone is different. But I can tell you this. Years ago, Gabby and I made the decision to leave at some point our typical traditional employment so that we could pursue this business, Coaching No Code Apps, full time as something of our own. And that transition for us took about a year. It's important to understand, and I just want to be very realistic with you, that at the crux, at the point where we were making enough or close to enough to leave our previous employment behind, but we weren't necessarily quite comfortable enough cutting ties altogether and moving forward, right? At that point, we were very overworked. It was just a lot. I mean, there are lots of compromises, lots of sacrifices, a lot of stress. And that's why, and this came to me through hindsight, of course, and it's why I want to pass it on to you. But creating those non-negotiables that we talked about is just so important. Because if you have that non-negotiable in place, it does give you a decision point, really, of, okay, I'm not here yet. What can I do differently? Or I have reached 50% of what I need, 75% of what I need, and I am feeling the point of being overworked. I don't know if I can make up the next 50%, 25%, if my attention is still split in two places, right? So if I reach 50%, I'm going to cut ties with that previous employment and I'm going to move forward with everything, all my focus on this business venture. That non-negotiable is so incredibly important. So if you haven't come up with it already as you're watching this video, that's what you need to do. And not only is it going to help you once you get there, it's going to be so valuable for you, but it's going to inspire you right now, because that non-negotiable is not some big picture vision that you have for what your life is going to look like once you've made it. It's not a vision of where your app could be at its most successful state, which can often feel overwhelming to work toward. And it can feel like you're not making progress because it just seems so far off. But that non-negotiable is not that. It's not that far off. It's not that crazy. When you put it down on paper, write down the number, right? It's not that crazy. And once you put that in place, you can actually have something that is within your grasp to work toward. And that provides a lot of inspiration, a lot of motivation, and it gives you, most importantly, the ability to be more disciplined, because you do have something very specific and you can say, okay, like, this is how much I need, this is how much time I need to allot each day for this period of time, and that's it. So come up with that non-negotiable, because that is your first real step toward being able to exit your current job. And look, if you want to invest in those earlier components, like we talked about, to help speed things along, we help people go from idea to pilot launch in our own private client program. And if that's something that you want to see whether you and your app would be a fit for and potentially join us in that, then the next thing to do is to schedule a strategy call where we will come up with a custom development roadmap for your app, and then again, just see if it would be a fit to move forward in helping you bring that to life. So you can schedule a strategy call over at coachingnocodeapps.com/call. We'll hope to learn more about you and your app soon, but otherwise, I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you in the next one.